Adults in Germany can now possess up to 25 grams of cannabis in public and grow up to 3 plants at home.
My biggest questions that I'm trying to get answered are, what does this program actually mean to the people of Germany? What does it mean to the people in Berlin and major cities? And when do they think the people will finally have open access to cannabis? On April 1st, 2024, Germany officially decriminalized the possession and home cultivation of recreational cannabis. Despite some remaining political pushback, this policy shift for one of Europe's biggest economies could mark the beginning of wider legalization and decriminalization across the continent. So we went to Berlin this year expecting to see a thriving recreational market, but as we found out, things are much more complicated. Coming in, I thought Germany was a recreational market. Like, I thought we're gonna come in here, we're gonna go into a rec store, we're gonna buy some flower, we're gonna buy some concentrates. It's gonna be as accessible as it would be in Colorado, in Oregon, in California, but it's not the case. Here, they're trying to stay within the very fine scope of what is legal and doing everything they can to not cross that line. But I thought this was going to be a free, open market, the home of cannabis in Europe. And what it really is, the opening up of regulation around cannabis. In very simple terms, possession and home cultivation was decriminalized, but recreational sales are still illegal. The only legal way to purchase cannabis in the country is still through their existing medical cannabis industry.
At the moment, you only have medical. There are only a few clubs in Germany, maybe a handful, who are already selling or giving recreational or adult cannabis to their members. The original idea was the regulation of the market. The first step was an amendment of the German Act of Narcotics, so that cannabis was not prohibited substance anymore. Then we had a two-pillar system. The first pillar was home grow and social clubs. Yeah, recreational, like we have in California and elsewhere. The second pillar they promised us was dispensaries, so a proper value chain within Germany. They reached only pillar 1, home grow and clubs. They skipped pillar 2. So because cannabis was removed from the Narcotics Act, it was far easier to give out prescriptions for cannabis. So the old pro-cannabis party and the conservatives is against cannabis. And they make the kind of agreement of peace, not to abolish the current regime, but also not developing it further.
Cannabis has been legal for medicinal use in Germany since 2017, but the industry is still experiencing a lot of growing pains. While progress towards a real recreational market has stalled for the time being, decriminalization and loosened restrictions have led to a surge in patients looking for medical cannabis options. To meet the growing demand, imports have played a major role in supplying pharmacies, but that comes with its own set of challenges.
Just so we all understand each other, the flower is not a finished pharmaceutical. It's always a magistrate when it reaches the pharmacist, and the pharmacist turns it into a finished pharmaceutical. So even with flower, all they do is they open the glass, they look at it and say, smells like weed, looks like weed, puts it in a different package and charges you 100% margin. That's what the market's like right here, which is audacious.
And it's not certified for sale until they see it and look at it. There's no direct-to-consumer way to do this right now.
That's the biggest problem. We can't secure quality, even in flour. The biggest mistakes is we can do everything right. Everything's in Turplock bags, but it's mainly the pharmacy that just, leaves the bag open.
Yeah, if there's a hair in it, if it's in a hot room or something.
And it's crazy because under GMP standards, we spent millions on facilities, on processes, on SOPs, just not to mix up the rooms, and the pharmacists don't even give a shit,
Yeah.
And a lot of people or pharmacists, they're not necessarily patients or consumers themselves. So we are seeing a transition that more and more pharmacists, enthusiasts, passionate people are leading this, but it's still a fucking challenge. We always have to go through another step, which means we import it into an EU country. It's manufactured here at another facility, which really means repackaged and labeled. But that entire process always comes with, permits, regulators. You're losing so much.
It lands in Portugal at a EU GMP process, and then that's a real bottleneck in Portugal. And then there's just the timelines are so slow.
It's happening during the summer. You can have a whole batch ruined if it's sitting in a container for 3 months, not moving. A lot
lot of people don't know this. I talk about a bureaucratic process, German standards, and you'd think that every agency sees it the same way, but we're actually cannabis lawyers, and in that sense, however, there's the law and then interpretation of the law. So every municipality has a guy sitting there, right, reviewing your papers, and maybe he had a fight with his wife, and that's why you don't actually get the products in. There's huge differences between the standards and kind of processes within the municipalities. And even for consumers, like I just said, Berlin and Munich are two different mindsets. It's getting better to the point where more and more agencies, there's a certain standard. An agency just a few kilometers the other direction might say, you're good to go, and ours said no, but then it's for all of Germany.
The federal government has said, hey, you can now get licenses to import and sell cannabis at pharmacies. And every state is either like, amazing, we're gonna issue a bunch of licenses, or we don't want this here at all. Nobody gets a license, it's not happening. By and large, most of the people we spoke to are focused on working with their legislators to push for a more open and someday even recreational market. For now, with very few exceptions, you need a prescription written by a doctor to purchase cannabis. However, because cannabis no longer qualifies as a narcotic in Germany, prescriptions have become much easier to obtain, leading to the very few gray areas in their market.
And so, how does it work here? Is it medical?
We cannot sell weed here yet. In the future, we're going to have a telemedicine situation where basically people come in, they get an iPad. With the iPad, they get the prescription from the doctor. The prescription gets sent to the partner pharmacy. The pharmacy has delivery people, and they basically bring the medicine, and we let them consume the medicine. Not smoke weed, consume medicine.
There is something called a telehealth service here in Germany. And if you're not German, it's really hard to access something on there and get it delivered to your door, but not impossible. The whole process from going to the website to having it delivered to your door by Uber actually only takes 45 minutes. We got our package, let's open it and see what's inside. From what I understand, some of the stuff here was made in Germany and some was made in Canada. There is no comparison between what's happening in the underground and what is available in the medical market. I know there are some struggles with getting the Canadian stuff here, and I know that it might come a bit old because it got jammed up in customs. However, they're still a bit ahead of the curve, and I think it's going to take some time for Germany to catch up. It's probably going to take a lot of regulatory change for that to happen.
This prescription procedures right now via telemedicine, abusing medicine for recreational supply. And this is not sustainable in Germany. This is against the law, against European law. Don't get me wrong, I'm not so much against it, but it's not a proper solution, and it won't succeed in Germany because it's not German that patients, that consumers get a prescription via the pharmacy and medicaments they don't need.
One option the recreational market does have for growth is their version of members-only cannabis social clubs. These are fully regulated clubs where cannabis can be distributed to members for recreational use. It is still early days for social clubs, and while some have started to open their doors, they are facing a lot of challenges.
They are called social cannabis clubs, but they are not very social by smoking together.
So people are going to come to social lounges here mainly for access.
But you're not allowed to smoke in social clubs. It's right cash and carry. On one hand, it's over-regulating the cannabis clubs. On the other hand, it's not regulating at all.
What would you think would be like the ideal model for Germans?
Dispensary. I think the only way is production in Germany. I tell you, every cannabis club which is opening right now is a manifest for freedom and the recreational smoke. But the quality must be better than on the black markets. Yeah, and you have these top growers in the black markets. Yeah, and they often are full of passion for the products. They are moving slowly now into the cannabis clubs.
Now that cannabis is decriminalized in Germany, it feels like there's more of a conversation happening between users and non-users alike. People like that something is no longer a crime. Overall, that is a great thing for German society. But what we notice the most of is people who are consuming and people who aren't, all eager to engage in a conversation on what the future of cannabis will be in Germany. It's going to take some time for them to be able to manufacture at quality and at scale here in Germany, but I think they're taking the right path and making sure that they can feed today's market while building out the future market. And And eventually, great cannabis has to come from Germany.
You know, if I paint a rosy picture, I see medical still, you know, playing a role within the next, call it 3 to 5 years. On the one hand, for real, you know, patients that need it, but also just ease of access and kind of the industry and the supply chain already standing. But I do also see, you know, social clubs and our politicians and regulatory bodies finding a way that we're going to have a true recreational industry in the future.
I think there are a lot of variables at play that will make cannabis successful in Germany. And so this is a moment not just to show Germany what the cannabis community can be, but to show all of Europe. And that is a responsibility that we all carry. So, is Germany the new weed capital of Europe? Only time will tell, but what do you think? Let us know down in the comments, and maybe consider subscribing if you aren't already. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.